Hi, I'm Joe Graydon.
I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy, where we bring you the stories behind the health headlines.
This podcast is brought to you by Redix Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Body Cream. 800-345-7339, on the web at uttercream.com. When you add spices and herbs to your meals, you may be getting more than good taste. Do spices have unexpected health benefits? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Rosemary is renowned for its aromatic and flavorful contribution to classic Italian dishes. It's great in tomato sauce with garlic and olive oil. Shakespeare celebrated this fragrant herb in Hamlet when he wrote, "There's rosemary, that's for remembrance."
A new study from Italy suggests that rosemary may help people live longer, healthier lives. What other spices have healing properties? Are there unexpected benefits from sage, thyme, and turmeric?
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, we welcome your calls and questions about herbs and spices.
First, this news.
In the People's Pharmacy Health Headlines, people who take NSAID pain relievers are more prone to developing heart failure, according to a new study from Europe. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as diclofenac, ibuprofen, or naproxen are mainstays for treating people with chronic pain such as osteoarthritis. The researchers analyzed hospital records of 92,163 people with heart failure and more than 8 million healthy control subjects. People who had taken one of the NSAID medicines in the preceding 2 weeks were 19% more likely to need hospitalization for heart failure. This is a condition in which the heart muscle is not strong enough to pump all the blood the body needs. Different medications carry different levels of risk. Naproxen increased the possibility of heart failure by about 16%, while the prescription NSAID ketorolac increased its likelihood by about 83%. Higher dosages were associated with greater risk. The drugs with the worst track records included a few that were being used in Europe between 1999 and 2010, but not in the U.S. Others are familiar, however: ketorolac, indomethacin, piroxicam, diclofenac, ibuprofen, and naproxen. Elderly people and those with heart problems are especially vulnerable to this dangerous side effect.
ED, or erectile dysfunction, has become a commonly recognized term, along with Viagra and Cialis, the drugs used to treat it. A new study from Portugal suggests that men who have erectile difficulties may be able to improve their symptoms with exercise. The research was a meta-analysis of 7 studies, including 500 men between 43 and 69 years old. These were randomized controlled trials that had some men doing regular aerobic exercise while others were not encouraged to increase their activity. Men who exercised improved their score on the International Index of Erectile Function. This included men with heart disease, increased cardiovascular risk, or those who had undergone prostatectomy. The improvement seen with exercise was equivalent to that seen with medication, suggesting that exercise should be part of the regular treatment for ED.
The FDA has just issued a stronger warning about the hazards of too much testosterone. Many men are taking this hormone to treat symptoms such as fatigue, low libido, or other sexual difficulties. The agency is particularly concerned with the possibility that men will abuse this male hormone or other anabolic steroids, as some bodybuilders have done. The FDA also warns that men who have been using such products for some time may develop dependence and experience withdrawal symptoms if they stop suddenly. The most serious complications associated with testosterone use are heart attack, stroke, infertility, liver toxicity, depression, and aggression.
The glycemic index of food tells us how quickly it raises blood sugar, while the glycemic load of a diet also takes into account how much blood sugar-boosting food is being eaten. An epidemiological study in China reveals that a high glycemic load diet predisposes older women to stroke. The study included data on 64,000 women between 40 and 70 years of age. They filled out detailed dietary questionnaires at the start of the study and were followed up for 10 to 12 years. During that time, 2,991 of the women had strokes and 609 died from stroke. Those whose diets indicated high glycemic index or glycemic load were 20 to 27% more likely than their peers to suffer a stroke.
When you're working out in hot weather, you need to replace the fluids you lose through sweat. That's only common sense. Researchers compared the effectiveness of 3 rehydration strategies. Air temperature water at a rate of 2 grams of water for each kilogram of body weight, the same quantity of an ice slurry of shaved ice and water, and half as much ice slurry. The athletes did best with the full amount of ice slurry, but the reduced amount of slurry was just as good as water. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon. I'm a pharmacologist.
I'm Terry Graydon. I'm a medical anthropologist. We were fascinated to read recently in the New York Times about centenarians in southern Italy. Could part of the secret to their good health be the potent rosemary they use in nearly every meal? To find out, we spoke with Dr. Alan Maisel. He's professor of medicine at the University of California, San Diego. He's also director of the Coronary Care Unit and the Heart Failure Program at the Veterans Affairs San Diego Healthcare System.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Maisel.
Thank you very much for having me.
Dr. Maisel, we are fascinated by an account that has hit the popular press about some research you're doing in a little place called, I think, Acciaroli, Italy. Did I get that almost right?
You got it better than almost right. You got it better than how I pronounce it.
Please tell us about your research.
And your vacation there.
Well, it's my research and Dr. De Soma's from Italy, and we started this together. We've been longtime friends. He's University of Rome, and we both work on biomarkers. And since he grew up in that area, Naples, he took me on vacations on his boat for about 4 years, and we would often stop this little place way south of there called Acciaroli. And after a visit or two, began to notice that, gosh, these people they're old, but they're walking around, and swimming and talking and, meeting everybody. And Sal knew the mayor, so we talked to the mayor, and we just over time thought maybe we should take a look at these people because they sort of stay right there. So there may be some genetics that are still good. And then they have some good attributes that seem to be above and beyond what you would normally see by the Mediterranean diet, which they follow, especially in what else they eat, the herbs and things they grow. So we got together with the University of Rome and came to San Diego, and our scientists and the mayor and some people at Acciaroli met at UCSD, and we thought we should try a pilot study. And now pilot means that I'm not going to have all the answers that you're looking for today, but we've at least begun to learn about the right questions. And so we really took a number of families, after we gave all the consents and all that, of people that live over 90, and also people in the households, and began doing surveys on them, cognitive function, what illnesses they have, and then drew bloods to begin to check some things, and then we're going to plan on doing further. We have DNA tests planned, metabolomics, things of this nature. So it's a work in progress.
Now, how old are the older folks in Acciaroli?
So Acciaroli is one town in the whole Salento Peninsula, of which there's like 30 towns. And we're trying to examine every one of those people, and we think that there may be about an incidence of 1 in 300 that live in the mid-90s to over 100, which is, up to 10 times more than what you'd see, say, in the United States. So it's still not clear, but we have pretty good records now from the GPs of these folks that we're definitely dealing, the centenarian is really 90s and 100s, and we're seeing an awful tilt toward the older patient population. And I think one of the things we're learning, and one of the things that we talk about is, they may live a little bit longer, but I think what we can sort of say, and what our data is going to eventually show, I think, is that they live healthier. I don't think any of us would care whether we live to 90 or 100 if we could say 85 versus 100, if we could live those 85 years without Alzheimer's, without osteoporosis, without cataracts, and this is exactly what at least our survey data is pointing to. In the majority of people, there are almost no Alzheimer's disease. There are very little fractures, but maybe most interesting of all is there's no cataracts. And who that's 80 doesn't have the beginning of the lens sort of going out. Well, 90 and the 100s, we haven't even seen any, and we're going to be exploring this in great detail, hopefully, with UCSD Department of Ophthalmology.
Well, that is fascinating, because I think in this country you'll find that a lot of us in our 60s are being told by our ophthalmologists, oh, you've got a cataract starting there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Dr. Maisel, you're primarily a cardiologist. You have a specialty in heart failure. So what are the hearts of these nonagenarians doing in Acciaroli and the rest of the Cilento?
Well, first of all, on a metaphysical way, they have wonderful hearts, and they're all they're laid back, they're pleasant, they have a joie de vivre, they smile, and obviously, and I'm sure you've talked about it in your show, that if you put this under stress reduction, that's probably going to be a key to a population living longer. But as we get down to the real nitty-gritty of cardiac disease, one very interesting thing that we have found, not yet published, because we want to validate it a little bit, is that they do get hypertension. However, and if you look at heart failure patients in our society, when the heart starts failing, oftentimes one of the two things that lead up to this is high blood pressure. Well, we don't see that. The blood pressure elevation does not seem to translate into weakening of the heart muscle, and that needs to be explored. Now, we've always known about the decrease in coronary artery disease because they are one of the groups, the original groups that were on the Mediterranean diet. We know that is a link if you can follow that. So that part's probably there, but I think this other thing goes maybe above and beyond that.
Well, I'd love to hear a little bit more about perfusion, and in particular, the blood levels of something, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, adrenomedullin, a peptide hormone that affects perfusion and circulation.
Sure. Well, the one we looked at is a little different form of adrenomedullin, which is a biomarker I've studied. It's a special piece of the compound called bioadrenomedullin, which is a really active portion, which really changes. And usually this stays quiet, but activates itself when these small blood vessels, not the big arteries that you can see pulsating in your neck, but the small blood vessels, capillaries, etc., those are the things that carry nutrients to parts of the body and remove waste products, all of which are probably really important, for instance, in cataracts, in Alzheimer's, things like this. So the adrenomedullin levels represent, if it's high, it represents the body's doing whatever it can to try to make the system, which is breaking down, work better. It's sort of a reactive kind of thing. And that's what the body's trying to do, make more of this adrenomedullin to sort of dilate out these capillaries, which are becoming vasoconstricted and not very useful for delivering good compounds and getting rid of bad metabolites. And in this group, preliminary though, but we're writing it up now, is that the levels, and we measured also levels of prediction at the same time of potential stress on the kidneys and stress on the heart. And they had both of those, just a propensity for that, and it usually follows all three markers in people that have disease, or even in older people are up at the same time. But here, while the kidney and heart stress markers are up, this blood vessel marker, the adrenomedullin, was very low, suggesting that they're doing great, that they're able to deliver what they need and remove waste. Not only that, they're at least the levels that you would see in a healthy young person. So we're very excited about that. Now we can only speculate what that means as far as disease state, but certainly we can say that their dietary survey reveals that they eat some very interesting things, that they grow, very unprocessed foods. The big one we were focusing on, and you can smell it when you're over there, is the rosemary. It is they all put it on every meal. They grow it, and it's just there's different compounds, we think, in this rosemary. We actually we're going to be studying this, doing mass spec on it, but we think we already know there's one compound, carcinic acid, that has been studied in the lab, and it shows there's improvement in brain blood flow and even cognitive function. So this is one of these compounds present in rosemary, and it's so enriched there. I mean, it smells like 10 times as powerful. But this needs to be ascertained, whether this is one of these key things, whether it's other plants that they use, whether it's more of a plant-based. I mean, they often raise their own, food, the fishes from nearby. This may, I think, potentially play a role.
Dr. Maisel, I'd like to ask you a little bit more about the Mediterranean diet, and specifically this idea that rosemary may have some really important properties for the centenarians there. We've been wondering whether some of the herbs and spices that are common in Mediterranean diets, and there's so many different types of Mediterranean diets, but specifically southern Italy has a lot of herbs and spices in that food. Could they partly be responsible for some of the health benefits that the Mediterranean diet is renowned for?
Wouldn't that be interesting? All the attention, of course, in the diet has been the fish and the olive oil and the olives and things like that. But yeah, I think it's certainly possible. We hopefully will, once we get more studies going, we're going to actually bring plants over and do DNA testing on the plants here. We also, in a preliminary way, so preliminary that I don't know that we can publish it without some further controls, but we looked at Dr. Mohit Jain here at UCSD is an expert in metabolomics, where you look at metabolites of different foods and what your body makes from drugs, and it seems to be very, very important. Well, we saw a couple of metabolites like light up that really we've never seen described in anybody before. So something is getting metabolized, maybe, and we think it could be one of the foods, whether it's rosemary or not, in a way that could be very important to the body. And so you see a signature of it in metabolomics. So, you could try to connect the dots, and we can do that on the show here, but we really need to do it scientifically, and we haven't really completed that yet.
You're listening to Dr. Alan Maisel. He is professor of medicine at the University of California, San Diego. He's also director of the Coronary Care Unit and the Heart Failure Program at the Veterans Affairs San Diego Healthcare System.
After the break, we'll find out what else the people in southern Italy are doing that may help them live such long, healthy lives. And we'll find out more about spices. Which ones are your favorites? We'll take your calls at 888-472-3366. Do you love rosemary as much as we do? Give us a call, 888-472-3366, or email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you like the information you hear when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, you may also enjoy our book published by National Geographic. It's The People's Pharmacy Quick and Handy Home Remedies, available online at peoplespharmacy.com or at your favorite bookstore.
Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Red X Industries. makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions that moisturize deeply to make dry skin feel soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you'd like to purchase a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. It's show number 1056. That number again, 800-732-2334, online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today we're bringing you up to date on the stories behind the health headlines. We're talking about culinary herbs and spices that may have healing properties. We invite you to join the conversation. How do you use rosemary or thyme or sage or turmeric? Our lines are open at 888-472-3366. What other culinary herbs and spices do you use for good health? Again, if you'd like to join the conversation, our lines are open, 888-472-3366. You can email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or reach us via Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy.
We're talking with Dr. Alan Maisel. He's professor of medicine at the University of California, San Diego, and director of the Coronary Care Unit and the Heart Failure Program at the Veterans Affairs San Diego Healthcare System.
You've commented that the folks in this village don't seem to be trying really hard to be healthy, in the sense that they're not out jogging every day and they're not, at the gym lifting weights, but they are hanging out at the local cantinas, they're drinking coffee, they're having a little red wine, they're socializing. And sometimes when you see Americans trying hard to be healthy, there's that grim look on their face because it's like, oh, it's 5:30 in the morning and I'm sucking in all these automobile fumes, but I've got to be out here jogging whether I like it or not. Tell us a little bit about that idea of just enjoying life.
Well, I couldn't have phrased it better than you just did, and it makes you think a lot. They do get exercise, but it's in their daily living. There's a lot of hills there. They're walking around a lot. But there is a joie de vivre that I think, I spend a week there and I go home and I am so relaxed for another week, and then life sets in. And even though I live in San Diego, which is pretty laid back, there's the traffic, there's the loud people, there's everything that would make you not so relaxed and fill you with a little bit of stress. I think at the results 2-3 years when we're done with this whole study, we may find some surprise in the genes or the metabolites, but I think basically we're going to find that healthy living and healthy aging is a combination of things, and it's sort of what you eat and what your stress level is and your joie de vivre and not doing some bad things like smoking and So I think this is all going to be part of that. Maybe we'll find some genes that help you in case you're not that way. But a lesson that I would that I've taken from it is really let's for instance, I said, okay, I'm going in a little early to work and avoiding the rush hour and leaving a little different. I'm going to take that stress out. And when I've always been lucky that I enjoy exercising, but I vary it and I do things like tennis and swimming and and I try to. If I need sleep in the morning, I say, okay, I'll need it. I'll do it another time and try to live by my body's signals a little bit more. And I think that's what you're getting at. And maybe that's we all live a hustle and bustle life. But let me tell you, the other thing, since you mentioned it, breathing the fumes, the air is very clean out there. And I think that's got to have some interplay with disease or lack of disease that we don't get here. If you jog outside and it's, I was just in Beijing and I couldn't even walk outside, yet, people I saw jogging, even though they had masks, they weren't the kind of mask where small particulate matter couldn't get through it. I'm thinking they're really taking a chance here.
In summing up your research, Dr. Maisel, I wonder what you would like our listeners to take away from this very preliminary research in terms of practical news they can use in their own lives.
Well, sure, and my own example one is, if you can reduce the stress a little bit, I think everybody can do it. There's books out there to do it, but you have to say, look, stress is bad. It kills, over time. And whether you need a little bit of meditating or a little nap or exercise where you're not going to wear and tear your limbs, but, vary it from swimming to tennis to golf to elliptical, whatever it is, just vary that. And then as far, sort of be nice to your neighbor, and if you can avoid pollution, fine. Red wine is probably fine. Coffee's probably fine. But
and maybe a little rosemary with your garlic and tomato sauce?
I think that I'm learning more from them and about the least processed you can do with your foods, And for instance, there are stores that are, quote, these healthy food stores, but yet they get their plants and fruits from quite far away. And if you can go local raised, sort of minimally processed foods, I think you're never going to lose on that. These guys they're not vegetarians there, although I know people advocate that. It's just not tenable for everybody, but I think they do eat a lot of fish, a lot of vegetables. And their meat, as far as I could tell, it's all, organic in that they don't use any hormones or antibiotics, things like that.
Well, that all sounds like excellent ideas for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Dr. Alan Maisel, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Dr. Alan Maisel, professor of medicine at UC San Diego. He's also director of the Heart Failure Program and the Coronary Care Unit at the San Diego Veterans Affairs Healthcare System.
Today, we are talking about spices and herbs and some of their unexpected health benefits. We welcome your calls at 888-472-3366. You can email us. We're radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or you can communicate by way of Twitter. We are at People's Pharmacy.
And, I think a lot of people go, well, spices, they make food taste good. I like rosemary. It's delicious. But how could it have any actual physiological, pharmacological effects on the body? But if you look, you might be surprised at how much research is actually out there, Terry.
It's true. There is a surprising amount of research on rosemary, and I have a feeling you're going to tell me about some of it.
Well, Dr. Maisel talked about, how do you pronounce it, carnosic acid?
Yes, carnosic acid.
So here's an article that came from September 2016 in Biomedicine and Pharmacotherapy, suggesting that sage and rosemary may have antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and anti-cancer benefits, and that carnosic acid in particular seems to be very powerful stuff at a cellular level. So that's really cool. And there's some research that's going to be coming out in just a couple of months, also suggesting some pretty powerful impacts of rosemary on the body. So it's not just the epidemiology that Dr. Maisel is doing, it's actually scientific data to support it.
Joe, we have an email from David who says, are they planning to study the gut microbiome of this population? That might be an explanation for the unusual metabolites. Certainly a good idea and probably should be part of their research.
888-472-3366 is the number if you'd like to join the conversation. We're talking about the healing power of culinary herbs and spices today on the People's Pharmacy.
We go to Ann in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Ann, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. Your comment or story, please.
Oh, hi, Joe and Terry. I've read, and I've also followed the advice of what I read, that rosemary is a good diuretic. I found it to be true. However, it did say in moderation, because if you overuse it, it can be hard or deleterious on your heart.
And I'm interested in the nature of the evidence on that. Do you know how they came to that conclusion?
No, I do a lot of reading.
Sure.
So, as far as the source, I'm sorry about that. I can't recall the source, but I do know that as far as the being a very good diuretic, it does work. And
so you found that if you use rosemary, it makes you urinate more. Yeah. How do you use it?
Well, I buy plants from the supermarket in the spring and have them in my windowsill. Just pinch off a couple leaves. They're like little pine needles. Sort of. And then I just put them in a salad or wherever.
Oh, great.
Or just sometimes wash them and eat them as is because I know that they're helpful. But I've also tried to moderate the use. I don't know what the usage should be of, exactly, so I don't overdo it. Like I don't put a whole sprig in a salad.
I don't think you're going to be able to overdo it with your fresh rosemary. I think you're going to be just fine, even with a sprig in your salad. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Now, if you were to eat the whole bush, that could be a problem.
Well, that would be a little challenging. What was it again that Shakespeare said in Hamlet?
Hamlet said, "There's rosemary. That's for remembrance." And then I think he went on to say, I don't remember what he went on to say. I never memorized that.
Section.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. There's some animal research, and this comes from a journal called Phytotherapia. And this was research in rats, so animal work. But what they did is they induced, in essence, in a kind of amnesia with scopolamine. Scopolamine is an anticholinergic drug. It was used for twilight sleep back in the 50s and 60s when women were delivering their babies so that they wouldn't remember or feel the pain.
It's still used for motion sickness as transderm scope, right?
Right, and it definitely affects the cholinergic nervous system. Well, in this particular study with rats, they used rosemary officinalis leaf, and they found that rosemary improved long-term memory in scopolamine-induced rats. It turns out that the extract of rosemary inhibited acetylcholinesterase activity, which is the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine, which is essential for memory. So, interesting biologic research.
I've got an interesting tweet for you. We have a message on Twitter from Kim Barrett who says, "Great to hear my UC San Diego colleague, Alan Maisel, talking healthy aging on People's Pharmacy this morning at NPR. Eat more rosemary."
Well, there you go. Let's go to Charleston, West Virginia. Hi, Lana. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy.
Hello?
Yes, please turn off your radio.
Oh, okay. I'm actually calling from Wilmington, North Carolina.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
I have a closet full of spices, and they're very expensive. And I've started dating them when I buy them, and I have some that go back 2 years. And now I know they've lost half of their taste. They must have lost half of their taste. But for example, cumin, pumpkin pie spice, thyme, ginger, Greek seasoning, etc., etc. Are the old dried spices in any way as good as the ones you go out and clip off the bush?
The answer is once they've lost that taste and that fragrance, no. You don't want to keep those spices for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. And I know that at one point I reviewed all the spices in my cupboard and I found some that probably were 10 years old, and I was embarrassed. You have to pitch them. They just aren't going to have the taste that you're after, and they definitely are not going to have the biophysiological activity that we've been discussing with the research. So we also got an email from Lon who said, "Is there a significant difference between fresh and dried spices?" And the answer is yes, there are some differences. We don't know exactly what they are and how they affect the body. But if you're going to use the dried spices, and let's face it, that's much more convenient in most cases, you do need to make sure that they are at least somewhat fresh. Probably use them within a year.
Right. And so labeling the way you are is really a good idea because once they get to be over a year or two old, it probably is time to pitch them. Thank you so much for the call.
These are all McCormick or somebody like that. But
sure.
Then there are health food stores around that will sell you a tablespoon of something at a time. and I try to use those. But how do you know when they're in the store?
That's a great question. But if you might ask the person who manages that part of the store and just to see how often they have to replenish their inventory.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. 888-472-3366 is the number to call if you'd like to join the conversation. You can also send us email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com. And Terry, there are a lot of other herbs besides rosemary. There's ginger for motion sickness and heartburn and colds. There's fennel for gas. There's thyme, Thyme, as a cough medicine. Dr. Taroni Lowdog has talked about that on the People's Pharmacy. And, of course, cinnamon to lower blood sugar, to lower triglycerides and cholesterol. We'd love to hear from you. How do you use culinary spices and herbs? That number to call, again, is 888-472-3366.
And, Joe, we've got an article here that was published in Advances in Nutrition, September 15th, 2016. It's about the Mediterranean diet and cognitive function. It's a systematic review of the evidence. They looked at 20 different studies. And what they found is that people eating a Mediterranean-style diet were much less likely to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or dementia. What they didn't do was they didn't look at the spices in that Mediterranean-style diet. And I think it's about time that we start looking at those spices as sources of important compounds.
Well, Dr. Maisel was suggesting that the people who lived in that part of southern Italy did, in that village, seem to have better cognitive function, less Alzheimer's disease, and most interestingly, less cataracts. And, what I read about his research suggested that these are people who are spending a lot of time out in the sun. So we know that they're being exposed to ultraviolet light. They probably don't have sunglasses. So they must be doing something else to prevent those cataracts at the age 90 or 100.
Because we know that ultraviolet exposure does increase the risk of cataracts. I love saying the name of that village, Acciaroli. And if you would like to read about it, you'll find links to that New York Times article from our website.
Absolutely. We actually don't have time to take another call before the break, but we would love to hear from you. Again, if you have favorite spices, let us know what they are. Perhaps you are a fan of thyme
or maybe sage. We've got research here, Joe, showing that sage extract can affect memory performance in mice, perhaps because of its acetylcholinesterase inhibition.
Well, there you go. Nice biomedicine. Again, if you'd like to join our conversation, our number is 888-472-3366. When we come back, we'll talk more about herbs and spices for medicinal purposes.
Was Hippocrates right when he said, let food be your medicine?
Do you use ginger for motion sickness? Have you tried a spicy concoction for muscle cramps? How well did it work? Share your spice stories. Again, that number, 888-472-3366. If our lines are full, email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. If you're enjoying this People's Pharmacy podcast, why not head over to our website where you'll find a wealth of information on medications, conditions, home remedies, and ways to keep yourself healthy. You'll find it all at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions, helping dry, cracked skin feel utterly soft and smooth. Won't do anything for my voice, though. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you'd like to purchase a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is 1056, or visit our website, It's peoplespharmacy.com.
Today we're talking about culinary herbs and spices and how we can use them to stay healthy. If you have a question or a story about a unique remedy using spices or herbs, you can email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com. Give us a call, 888-472-3366, or reach us through Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy. The number again, 888-472-3366. Shall we go to Tampa, Florida?
Yes, we shall.
Norma. Norma, welcome to the People's Pharmacy.
Hi, Joe and Terry.
Hi, Norma.
I listened some time ago when you had Dr. Mitchell Gaynor on the program.
Uh-huh.
And he spoke about black cumin.
Yes.
And I have done some research. I found black cumin, and I've incorporated a drink for me in the morning that's having great success.
Wonderful. What benefits are you seeing?
I've lost a lot of belly fat. My inflammation has gone down. I have feeling in my fingertips on my right hand again, and my joints are less swollen.
Well, that all sounds absolutely terrific, Norma.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Let me tell you what I do, though.
Please.
I take the black cumin seed and crush them and make a tea out of them. I let it steep for 15 minutes or so. Then I add in a third of a teaspoon of turmeric off my shelf, and about a fourth of a teaspoon of ginger. And I add a bouillon cube because I like that, a mini bouillon cube. And then I reheat and stir and enjoy it. And when I talked with my rheumatologist a few weeks ago, she told me that one reason I'm having such success is because, like turmeric supplements and stuff, they're not very effective. But if you incorporate them into something that you're consuming, and especially with heat, they work wonders.
And especially a little bit of fat will help. And there are some other compounds that can help you absorb that curcumin, which we think is the most active component of the turmeric. And possibly the black cumin has some of that. I don't know.
So, Norma, your rheumatologist has bought into this recipe that you're following.
Pardon?
Your rheumatologist is on board with the program.
Oh, yes. Keep it up.
Well, terrific. Thank you so much for sharing, Norma.
Now, turmeric and ginger both have anti-inflammatory activity along with the black cumin. So it sounds like Norma is really onto something.
She seems to be getting benefit. We're delighted. We go to Lost Creek, West Virginia. Hi, Marilyn. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy.
Hi, Joe and Terry. First, I wanted to thank you for speaking and attending the West Virginia Herb Association conference. It was wonderful, and I picked up all kinds of good information.
Well, we really enjoyed it, so thank you.
Yes, we were very pleased to be there, and the folks were just fabulous. So thank you really for having us. It was a lovely event.
Next, I wanted to tell you I have an herbal products business, and I recently expanded it. And I make several different products with rosemary that I find effective. And the two I wanted to tell you about, I make a winter herb tea, and it actually is made with rosemary, sage, and thyme. And I find that just helps maintain my health throughout the winter months.
Well, I seem to recall a song by that name.
Yes, I don't put parsley in the winter herb tea.
Now, do you use fresh or dried herbs? I guess they would have to be dried to get you all the way through the winter.
For the winter, I use dried herbs. That's correct. Mm-hmm. And another tea I make is a tea I call cold and flu tea. And I don't recall all of the ingredients off the top of my head, and I'm on the road. But it contains rosemary also. And my experience has been that within 20 minutes, any cold and flu symptoms just seem to vanish. Your nose quits running, your throat quits itching or burning, and that effect will last for about 2 hours, and then I drink another cup of tea.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much for telling us about that, Marilyn.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Some other herbs that we have used for colds and flu include ginger and thyme for coughs. So, and I think there was research recently. Let me see if I've got this here. Herbal medicine for cough. Yeah, they did some research. They did a meta-analysis, and this review found strong evidence for Andrographis paniculata, which is not a culinary herb in most Western diets. It might be used in Chinese dishes, and a thyme-based preparation for cough symptoms significantly superior to placebo. So there you have it, Joe. There is research. This one was published in a German medical journal.
We go back to West Virginia. Lana, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's this about Grenada?
Well, hi, Joe and Terry. This is Lana in West Virginia, and I have this is so timely for me because not only did I dig up my herbs this year and bring them inside and put them in the windows. My bedroom smells like basil, but when I cook, I come to snip everything, and I have spices by my stove, so as I cook, anything I can think of goes in that dish. So I'm consuming that in my food. But the other thing about Grenada is that recently I found out that there are spice farms in Grenada that produce something called oil of nutmeg. It's supposed to be a very healing oil. So I am considering going to Grenada for my vacation this year to investigate what all of these spices are, because it says that Grenada is the spice capital of the world. And I was wondering if you know anything about that and anything about oil of nutmeg.
Lana, I have to admit, I didn't know that Grenada is the spice capital of the world. I don't know if it's true, but it does sound like a lovely place to take a vacation. Make sure you take your mosquito repellent with you, however. You don't want to get any mosquito bites. Oil of nutmeg is not one that I am super familiar with. Nutmeg, like all the other spices, does have effects on our body, and I just am not really read up on what it can do.
You know what's so interesting, Terry, is if we were to go back to the 1100s, 1200s, to the medieval period, people loved spices, and they were obviously willing to spend an awful lot of money on them. And they expected them to have medicinal properties.
Oh, yeah. And also there was a lot more crossover between what you considered, part of your food, like stinging nettle. People ate a lot of stinging nettle as well as used it as a spice.
Now, tell me a little something about this
curcumin.
Research.
I absolutely will.
And depression.
But first I want to read you a message that we got on Twitter. MLH says, I add a tablespoon of cinnamon to coffee grounds when I'm brewing. Do I get any medicinal benefits? I hope you're brewing more than 1 cup. A tablespoon is a lot of cinnamon, but it's a great way to get the benefits of cinnamon, which can lower blood sugar, lower triglycerides, and lower cholesterol.
Cool. Now, tell me more about this research.
Curcumin. Well, this was a placebo-controlled trial. They had 120 people, so 30 people in each group. One group got placebo capsules. Another group got a low-dose curcumin extract. That was 250 milligrams. They took it twice a day. Another group got high-dose curcumin extract, 500 milligrams. They took it twice a day. Another group got a combination of the low-dose curcumin along with some saffron extract, and they took it twice a day. And here's what they found. First of all, the curcumin extract they were using was BCM 95. It is more bioabsorbable. And the study lasted for 3 months. They used standardized scales to measure both depression and anxiety, and they found that the curcumin high, low, or mixed with saffron, all were significantly better than placebo at alleviating both depression and anxiety. Adding the saffron didn't make any difference, so don't bother. Saffron's real expensive. And moreover, the high dose and the low dose were not different, so you might as well use the low dose, eh?
Absolutely. Let's go to the phones. We talk to Robert in Clearwater, Florida. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Robert. What's on your mind?
Thank you. I'm enjoying the show, and I always enjoy your show whenever I can catch it. I wanted to point out that I don't think meat is really ready to eat until it's been properly seasoned or marinated. And I always remember the song, the Simon and Garfunkel song, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme. Those are the perfect seasonings to just pat all over your meat, your steak, whatever you're having, your chicken, and let it sit overnight in those spices. And another thing is whenever you're making chili, rosemary is the most ultimate thing to go in your chili. Not to mention marjoram and thyme as well. And then finally, I wanted to two other things. One other thing is I quit eating after 3 o'clock because of acid reflux, and that has completely solved my problem of acid reflux. Except by about 7 or 8 o'clock, I start to get a little bit of a sour stomach because of it being empty. If you'll chew on just a little bit of ginger, that'll go away, and you can go to bed and sleep the whole night and have no problem with that. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to point out was I think I lost my train of thought. But anyway, those are some of my. Oh yes, when you're making lentils, the thing that I have enjoying so much about making lentils right now, of course, marjoram is the number one seasoning to go into your lentils. Put them in while the beans are soaking, but also put in rosemary while the beans are soaking, and put in onion, and then put in peppers, whatever peppers, even hot peppers. And you will be surprised. Whenever you cook those lentils, all of that will mesh in. The peppers won't be too hot, and it will just make the most delicious soup and healthy for you as well.
Well, so Robert, you've given us a lot to think about.
Well, you're going to be making a whole batch of chili today. So.
I am, and I've not ever used rosemary in my chili. I put in cumin, I put in chili peppers, and, I do put in both marjoram and oregano, but I've never thought of putting in rosemary.
Well, today might be the opportunity. Thank you again, Robert, for a very interesting call. Terry, we had an opportunity to talk to, was it Robert Bean, Dr. Bean from Harvard a couple of weeks ago?
Bruce Bean.
Bruce Bean, that's right. He and his partner, his friend, his colleague, Rob McKinnon, who is a Nobel Prize winner, had developed hand cramps when they were out ocean kayaking, and they came up with a concoction that involved, as I recall, ginger and maybe some cinnamon and some cayenne or some essence of hot pepper. Capsaicin
is essence of hot pepper.
And they found that it took away their cramps in about 2 minutes. They marketed a product. They have a team behind them called Hot Shot. Well, we got an email from someone who said that she has made homemade Hot Shot for neuropathic pain, nerve pain. She says, I put equal amounts of Ceylon cinnamon, ginger, and paprika in a shot glass. Then I add a teaspoon of fresh lime juice and honey to sweeten. It's delicious, and presumably it works just as well.
She reported that it worked extremely well. Now, paprika does have some capsaicin in it, but not nearly as much as cayenne pepper or Tabasco, for example.
Let's go to Tim in Carborough, North Carolina. Tim, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. You have a question about rosemary?
Hi, Joe and Terry. Yeah, I was wondering, when you're cooking with rosemary, because I usually like to put it, like red potatoes, put them in the oven and roast it with some sprigs of rosemary.
Yum.
When you do that, usually I leave the rosemary basically on the branch. I've got a little plant out back. I just take a piece of it off, lay it on top and cook it, and then when I'm done cooking, I pull it off. Do you still get the same benefits, or is it better to pull the little leaves off and cook it and kind of incorporate it and eat them as well? Do you still get the same benefits if you're just cooking with it for the flavor?
You know what, Tim? I don't know the answer. That's something we're going to have to find out. I think you might need to eat the leaves, but
okay.
I don't know.
I was just wondering if you can, kind of get some of the oils and all the good stuff out of it, when you cook it down.
Yeah, if you're getting the flavor, you're probably getting some of the benefits. You're probably getting some of the essential oils and the volatiles that are doing whatever it is they do in your body. So you're probably getting some of the benefit. I just don't know if you're getting as much as you could. I don't know. So we're going to have to find somebody who has done some research on this question and ask.
Thank you so much for the call. Finally, one last call. We go to Rapid City, South Dakota. Hi, Joe. You have a question about herbs?
Hi there. See, I had a comment on make sure you're pesticide-free on your herbs.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of herbs that are doused with pesticides. So go organic for your own benefit and your health. And the Hilton Head, South Carolina had a research study that they did on black cumin oil where they found it to be more effective than chemo and radiation against cancer. That was done in 1997.
And that probably was something that may have been done in a test tube or in the laboratory. I doubt that it was a clinical study, but we'll definitely look for that.
Check into that, yeah.
Well, you know what's so interesting, Joe? There is this fascinating article in a journal called Nutrients, in which they're looking at a variety of spices, including curcumin.
And black cumin.
Which
I think is
and
Nigella.
Saffron, and ginger, and chili peppers, and black pepper. And the title of the article is Spices for Prevention and Treatment of Cancer. It's worth looking at. It's really cool.
Very interesting. Relatively few of the studies that they review, however, are clinical trials.
No. And it would be nice if we did get some of that kind of research. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for listening, and thanks to our guest, Dr. Alan Maisel, Professor of Medicine at UC San Diego.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Sophie Copeland provided technical assistance. Al Wadarski is the engineer. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Red X Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Extra Care 20 Cream with 20% urea for extra skin protection. 800-345-7339, online at uttercream.com.
If you'd like to order a copy of today's show, you can call 800-732-2334. The number is 1056. That number again, 800-732-2334. Or you can find it online at peoplespharmacy.com, where you can also tell us what you think about the show or find information on herbs and spices and home remedies and prescription drugs, and you'll find links to the articles we talked about.
You can also find a link to our book, People's Pharmacy, Quick and Handy Home Remedies from National Geographic, with some of our favorite foods and spices. And you can subscribe to the free podcast of our show or the free email newsletter at peoplespharmacy.com. In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thank you so much for listening, and please join us again next week.
If you like culinary herbs and spices, you might like our new book, Spice Up Your Health: How Everyday Kitchen Herbs and Spices Can Lengthen and Strengthen Your Life.
In it, you'll learn how spices from anise to vanilla can help you stay healthy. Look for it at peoplespharmacy.com.